welcome to this special broadcast live on Moneycontrol with me, Stacy Pereira. Today we're here to discuss something that's been a hot topic of debate and also has made headlines quite often in the recent past. That's right, there is increasing scrutiny from market regulator SEBI over what has come to be known as Finfluencers. Now, let's give you some context to what we're discussing. Now, at the start of this week, we saw full-page ads that was created by YouTube with a prominent Finfluencer with text that read, "Trust only the real experts." Now, obviously, the ad was a part of YouTube's campaign called Hit Pause, with a goal to educate people about the perils of consulting fake gurus, perhaps, and also especially with matters related to investments and whether you should be going ahead and consulting these people without any fallback. But instead, we do have people who've come out, and this has ruffled quite a few feathers, saying who really is the one to be deciding who is a real expert. Now, should YouTube be the one deciding, since they're the ones putting out the ad? Should market regulator SEBI have a say in it? Well, there are different versions that have come out since then, and which is what the topic of debate is. In fact, just on their board meeting, we did hear from SEBI chairperson Amadbi Puri Buch, who said that a discussion paper now will be put out on regulating financial influencers, and that will perhaps be out in the next couple of months. So till that still comes out, there is this grey area that we are floating in. But first, let's listen into what she had to say.
जबकि अगर वो जेन्युइनली एक्सपर्ट हैं तो वो भी जानते हैं कि मार्केट में ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है, कोई गारंटी नहीं होती है, राइट? वॉरेन बफेट का भी लॉस होता है. तो अगर आप एक्सपर्ट हैं और आप रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं लोगों को कि ये एकदम गारंटीड तरीका है पैसे बनाने का, तो वो फिर हमारे सिस्टम में इंड्यूसमेंट के तौर पे माना जाएगा और वो एक फ्रॉडुलेंट और मिसरिप्रेजेंटेशन, मिसलीडिंग काम माना जाएगा.
Right. So they're almost telling you that selling that crorepati dream on social media could be looked at as a fraud. Now, should Finfluencers then be worried, or because this unnecessary lens being put on them, scrutinized, or is it just because the medium they're choosing to put out this, is that become a bone of contention? Let's discuss each and every point of this. Joining me for this is Milan Sharma, the founder and MD at 35 North Ventures, Abhishek Kar, a YouTuber as well as Finfluencers, also on the show, as well as Nirav Karkera, a stock market expert from Fisdom, is also joining us. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for giving us your time and speaking with us here live at Moneycontrol. Let me start first by, I'll get each one of your views on this, but there is increasing cases of fraud that is being, noticed, misplaced advice being given, be it Finfluencers or even a SEBI registered advisor. But is a lot of it going unchecked right now because we know that there is no law governing it? Let's take this first to Abhishek, because that's what you're doing. Is it taken more lightly because there is no law right now?
So yes, to be honest, whatever ma'am has said, like we saw in that report where she was actually addressing, yes, it has not been regulated so far. So that is one of the reasons. But let's understand that being a Finfluencer and representing the entire Finfluencer world, a lot of time, what matters is our intent. A lot of influencers, for example, where you actually started this conversation with, the intent wasn't to portray that person itself as a very big expert. But you got to understand that if you need eyeballs, you guys are also from the media houses, you do understand that sometimes the headlines do matter. And in that case, even the Finfluencers, when it comes to building up the thumbnails, building up the reels, the photographs, the graphics, sometimes they need to do all these things because otherwise they won't be able to grab the attention. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all the Finfluencers are actually breaching the trust. I do admit, I do agree that a lot of them have been doing these things for quite some time, specifically after the COVID rush. And that has definitely brought in a sort of generalization amongst a lot of people. But let's not forget that how influencers have even contributed towards the mass participation in our stock markets. Over the last decade, we have seen huge jump, in fact, the highest jump in terms of demat openings. And obviously, influencers have a crucial role to play over here. Other than that, we can see record breaking mutual fund investments. I wouldn't say that it's just the AMC managers who have contributed toward this thing. Of course, we cannot deny the fact that they have definitely helped out over here, but it was influencers also who have educated the masses over the concepts of compounding and how to beat inflation with the help of equities, which has eventually helped these kind of participation. And not to forget that even lately, talk about media houses, be it print as well as the physical media, they also probably realize that the kind of reach influencers have, it becomes convenient to pass on any sort of message. To answer your question, finally, yes, it needs to be regulated to some extent. It's a welcome step. But then straight away saying that almost every influencer is doing something wrong is completely absurd. I believe that the regulator also need to understand a bit of the ground realities, and based on that, if they are actually trying to take some sort of action, those are mostly welcome from our end
Abhishek,
as
so
well.
that it's a given that we're not trying to generalize, of course, that comes for every medium for that matter. But then many would argue just saying that, just rendering advice, all of these people also have some bit of qualifications that they come with, right? So are they just simply at all being targeted, or are they, where do RIIs really stand in this? They are also as qualified as these influencers. So is it just the medium that they're choosing or the reach that they have that has put them in the spotlight? Milan, you can take this question.
Hi. Thanks for inviting on this debate. In my opinion, see, whenever it comes about the financial market, and where a lot of retail customers are involved, this topic is essentially involving all the retail investors only. So I firmly believe that the market is regulated and it should be regulated, because if really I am also a registered SEBI analyst, and even to give any kind of opinion on the markets for any kind of stocks, there have been clear guidelines about the advisory as well as on the research side. So it is a matter, whether you are influencing someone or giving advice via YouTube or some other channel of yours. It tantamounts same thing. You are ultimately interacting with the customer, and you are in a position to influence. Especially if we talk about influencers where you have millions of following or in lakhs of following. So you can influence. And what I mean by influencing is, when it talks specifically in terms of a particular script or particular sector, you can make a lot of influence on the retail investors especially. So I think there is no reason why this should not be regulated. When all of the research analysts, all of the advisors, they have to pass the particular exam or they have to get registered with SEBI. Only then they are giving you can say, the authority to give their advice, and that also with a disclaimer. And I think I'll not agree. To maybe we might have difference of opinion when it comes to with the influencers. But me as a regulated entity, we are running four funds, also regulated funds, under registered as SEBI. So we understand that it is a very thin line. You cannot expect that the retail investors coming into market for the first time, he understands the nuance of the market, the risk of the market. Though disclaimers are always there, mutual fund also, they say that, investment is subject to risk. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at some of the YouTube channels, especially nowadays in the last 2 years, but actually post-COVID, I mean, it's bizarre, it's totally, completely haphazard, completely unregulated. Anyone can come and create a channel because it's free. You can start if you're a good orator. Being a good orator doesn't mean that you're good at the finance also, or you understand the nuance, or you see before advising anyone. It's just like you can understand as a doctor patient. If you're not a qualified doctor, as a qualified doctor might also do some kind of wrong diagnosis. That's a different thing. But to advise someone, to advise a patient on a particular thing, he needs that qualification. He needs that kind of training. So that is, in my opinion, it has to be regulated. It should be regulated. There's no question. this cannot go on like this, the way it is going on a rampant basis, that anyone and everyone is allowed to create a channel and become an expert, and they are creating any kind of you can say frame, the online frame on it, and coming out with all kind of advices, so it has to be regulated. In my opinion, I think maybe if not as a registered advisor or registered research analyst, then maybe some third category can be created for them. But something has to be there, so that they're accountable for whatever advice they're giving, right?
Right. So we all are happy with the fact that there might be some kind of regulations, be it for influencers, also the registered advisors right now. But where is that redressal? As a common man, I am now, because I am out there, I am listening or getting adapted to a lot of suggestions that are coming via Finfluencers. Where is that redressal? Even a registered advisor could be wrong, right? There's no way of saying that there is a right or wrong in this situation. So where is that redressal mechanism? Will SEBI then be that person to go to, saying that this is where things went wrong? Maybe Nirav, you can take this one.
Yeah, sure. The redressal mechanism is very much there. Let me just put that out right there. So SEBI has a redressal mechanism. It calls it SCORES. SCORES is the acronym that the redressal mechanism goes by. And obviously, if no one can deny the fact that we are in a world where caveat emptor, or buyer beware sort of prevails. But the same logic does not really extend to financial services as much, because there is as much a responsibility on the seller as much as it is on a buyer. Obviously, there are like with every industry, even in this industry, there could be a few bad apples. Let's talk about the RIA side, or the Finfluencer side of distribution. There could be a few bad apples, but not necessarily all of them are similar, at least in terms of their intent and in terms of earnest efforts that they put, right? So like Abhishek had mentioned, I am concurring with that partially. One very important point in this entire context is that if a Finfluencer can go wrong, and so can an RIA. The whenever an RIA goes wrong, you at least have a fair sense that the RIA has gone through the requisite educational programs that's required to give the best kind of advice or guidance, backed by thorough thoughts, knowledge, material, information, infrastructure, and all of such requirements that are mandated by the regulator. However, in the case of a Finfluencer, who in this case we are presuming is not equivalently qualified, he may lack the resources or the knowledge to give out financial advice with at least a fair degree of thoroughness. So I feel on the premise where you said even an RIA could go wrong as much as an Influencer can go wrong, the question is not even a question of probability of going wrong, but as much as it is a question of how prepared are both of them, and what kind of thoroughness are they bringing to the table when they are attempting to advise or influence a financial decision. I feel regulation has, whenever we talk about regulation, a lot of it is spoken, with an undertone of policing, but we miss out on the fact that regulation also needs certain, also ensure certain prerequisites are met, and ensure certain standards are, aligned with before one practices in that particular field. So, yeah.
Right. So let's get to that question exactly. So who really should be the one deciding who's the real expert? Now, SEBI has already said that they are going to come up with that discussion paper, but what they're also saying, more importantly, is that regulated entities cannot then be engaging with these unregulated ones. So does that mean now everyone will have to then be a SEBI registered advisor only, then they can be putting out things, and is that really feasible? Milan, you can take this one.
Yeah, you're very correct. We have to look at the feasibility of, because millions of channels can be there, so it's not humanly possible to regulate that way. So maybe some kind of thought can go into this, that how to regulate something. What I'm saying is that something is required. It cannot be that kind of rampant. It cannot be let loose also the way it's happening today. Everybody on the finance world. Some kind of guidelines, I'm sure, to start with. The baby steps can be taken. Something to which can, and gradually we can move towards that. Nothing can be built overnight, no kind of regulation in this kind of, it's a huge market, where millions of people are trading and millions of people are the investors. So it is time that we have some kind of regulation, agreed. But yeah, it will take some time. You can't be very harsh on the regulation. You can't come back overnight, because they have, as uh, gentleman said, that they also have a role. They have also contributed to the growth of the market, and that is fine. That I also agree to a certain extent, that all the market has the market has benefit from them.
Right.
But at the same time, regulations, yeah.
Right, Abhishek, maybe you can come in now and tell us, see, a lot of these influencers, all of them have become what they are. It's because of how lucrative this turned out to be, right? Like, otherwise a normal RIA would have to gain those people's trust and gain them from very traditional methods. Here now you get a brand endorsement, you are out there. There is that money matters also at the end of it. Is that somewhere where people can think that it is dodgy or deceptive, and one should use their own kind of guidance then to be, going ahead and taking that kind of advice?
See, ultimately, in the age of technology, I believe even people have become a little smarter. So we cannot simply put up a gun over all the influencers that if they are not qualified. And talking about the qualification, I just want to touch upon this thing. Even the influencers, which indirectly we have referred over here in this conversation as of now. So, for example, the print thing which we were talking about,
Right.
the person is a qualified chartered accountant. A lot of influencers, they are in fact passed out from premier B schools. Some are from IITs, and I personally have done my MBA, etc. So I'm not just trying to vouch that everyone is equally qualified, but there are certain things. Ever wondered why only approx, I guess, 1,300 people have so far got into the registration thing?
Right.
It's not new thing. Everyone knew about this thing for the last decade, but why so less? So there are a couple of reasons which from the Finfluencer side I can tell you. So for example, in Finfluencers also there are specific categories. One which exclusively talks about personal finance. There's another one which talks about trading, and they also do a lot of trading. Now, as per the RA regulations, there are certain regulations which prohibits a lot of trading kind of things you can't do in your own account. You need to wait for 20 days or 30 days. So there are a lot of regulations, and there are a lot of influencers who are influencing as well as trading. So they don't want to let go of their trading capacities, considering that once they get registered into the registration process, there will be a lot of things which they can't do. Another thing which we got to understand is a lot of influencers who are relatively younger, they might be exceptionally good with their domain knowledge, and we cannot deny, we cannot just put up an age that unless you are a 30-year-old or 40-year-old only, then you have an experience. I've seen a couple of them who are maybe in their early 20s. They started quite early, maybe because of their family background, maybe by the age of 13 and 14, and now they are trying to educate. Now, just imagine they don't have the necessary qualifications. So if you're going to put them all that you need to get registered into RA or IA, and the very fact they started educating not just for the fun of doing it, but also to get some additional income to maybe sponsor their college fees or whatever they wanted to do. If we are actually going to bring in that sort of tough regulations that everyone wants to apply for RA, a lot of influencers may not be able to do that. In fact, a lot of people who are probably very good with their stock market skills. We should not forget the fact that there are a couple of legends. For example, Radhakishan Damani sir, he is legend in terms of stock market investing and trading, but he doesn't have necessary qualification. I'm not saying, I'm not going in that advising part, but what I'm trying to say is it's practically, I think, yes, regulation needs to be over there. But if we are trying to generalize everyone into this one common format, that would be wrong. Yes, the deals, the sponsorship, everything had been very lucrative. But let's face it, what happens is, I'll tell you in just 2 lines.
Sure.
Sometimes it turns into a propaganda. So I was reading one of the articles from one of the prominent newspapers in the first quarter or in the last quarter. Almost 56% of the PMSs have underperformed the benchmarks. Okay.
Right.
And these PMSs are obviously the registered people. They have gone through the rigorous process and everything. And Morningstar, which is a reputed organization, keeps on publishing how over a longer period of time, in 15 to 16 years, almost 80% or 70% of the mutual funds also fail to beat the benchmark. Aren't they regulated? They are. Aren't they having the experts? Yes. Aren't they qualified? Yes. I'm not saying they are wrong, but what I'm trying to say is it's all about how we are trying to build up a perspective. Suddenly you build up a perspective that influencers are only taking money, they are only showing screenshots, they're only doing all the wrong things. The propaganda becomes, and everyone turns out that yes, influencers are bad. I would again say, yes, there are certain loopholes. We welcome the regulations, but we cannot, I think we need to have a separate set of regulations out there for influencers. We cannot be generalized into the same RA and the IA regulations. Another thing is the IA regulation says you can only have 100 clients.
Yeah.
Now, if influencer who has a million or 2 million followers, let's say even gets it to an IA process, do you really think they would get only 100 clients? They would get thousands and thousands of clients
Right.
because of their marketing and their reach. So there are certain things. So I don't think so the existing framework would work out really well. And that is probably what the regulators are also working with. And that is why I guess they are going to come up with this paper. So we're just waiting for what is this. But I believe making it very strict will obviously try to, demotivate a lot of influencers. And as a consequence of that, we are not probably realizing, but the participation to some extent might take a hit on a short term also because of the
Right.
same reasons.
Right. So we are saying that retail participation, in fact, has improved, if not because we are getting that much information available so readily from influencers. Okay, another phenomenon that happened over this whole episode that we saw with the ads and with the SEBI chairperson also speaking was the fact that there was the Ministry of IT minister also had to come out and give a clarification because the ad that came out had the IT ministry logo. Now that again became a contentious point because they came out and said that they are not outrightly endorsing these influencers or endorsing the social media platform itself. But of course, that platform is a way of monetizing, right? So where will we draw the line for that? Where are these people now? Suppose it's all regulated, everyone gets to come out and give their 2 cents of advice. But where is this supposed to happen? How is one supposed to monetize it then? And where is everyone supposed to be giving them this platform? Milan, you can take this.
As I said, there's no doubt that there's some kind of regulation has to be there because it's too rampant, and to the interest of investor, it always makes sense that some kind of regulation is there. But now, as I said before, the kind of regulation which you're talking about, because I think for the same reason, SEBI is having this paper also, discussion paper is for the same purpose. So to start with, there can be some basic criteria has to be in place, for anyone who's starting a channel, a YouTube channel in a stock market kind of thing. Fine. See, you can have channels everywhere else, but when it comes to investing and finance, and because you see that I also agree that returns are not guaranteed. Doesn't mean that if you are a qualified IITian or qualified from IIMs or whatever qualified CFA that you will always be an expert. That is a possibility every time. But the point is, if you are what I always believe is, if you are educated, if you understand the finance better than a layman, or if you are qualified to give kind of that really helps. It's again same. As a practice. Why do you need an MBBS degree to perform? It doesn't mean that you will be a. There can be a case, where somebody's advice can work for a patient, who's not a qualified doctor, but that doesn't make a case. So ultimately, when you talk about the market, when you talk about the investment, where somebody can influence the investment, and money can be lost or in good quantity. So in that case, I think some kind of credibility has to be there, and that can only be in terms of his some kind of registration or some kind of accountability, in terms of some kind of education. Something has to be there. It cannot be again. I'll say it cannot be just let loose.
Right. Maybe I'll get a last word with Nirav. What is his take on this whole thing? Should we just be waiting and for these guidelines to come out, and will that then give a level playing field for influencers as well as RIAs, and only from then? And what happens to the common man who is at the receiving end, and who are they supposed to be going to in this interim?
Right. So till the time there is clarity, a couple of takeaways for the common investor, right? Like with most things in life, the truth here also lies somewhere in the middle. All right. One must understand that it is not influencers versus advisors, and these are not two different parties to a subject at opposite ends. Both are chasing the same agenda and are operating within the same ecosystem. सो इरादा सेम है, ऑब्जेक्टिव सेम है, लेकिन तरीका थोड़ा सा अलग है. And whenever we talk about regulations and regulatory purview, we just talk about the regulations that are already in place, and how can we fit a new and developing system into an existing regulation. But however, as most people following the statements by the regulator also would appreciate and acknowledge that these new developments, right, like this entire breed of influencers that we are talking about, they are an important element of this entire ecosystem, but they should be dealt with and should be supported from a very different perspective than one would do, probably traditional advisors. So the regulator is also, expressly, trying to create regulations that would not impede in the distribution of such educational content, and should not impede the good work that many influencers are doing, but at the same time should ensure that guardrails are in place, and the influencers like RIAs and like RAs become just another participant who continue to empower and expand the ecosystem in a more responsible manner. So I feel for the common investor down the street, the biggest word of I would say, so now I'm already, contemplating the use of the word advice. But, one suggestion that I would make for the common investor is please do your own research, whether it be an RIA or an RA or a influencer, where you get your initial idea. The final responsibility, the final onus is yours as much as the money that you're going to be investing is yours. The biggest things, the biggest assets that you could gain from such participants like RIAs, RAs, influencers, and I use all of these three in the same line, as they are all participants in the same ecosystem, chasing a similar agenda of expanding and educating. It is an investor's responsibility to take ideas and work on their own and ensure that the final decision is theirs, because at the end of the day, no one understands you and your personal circumstances and your money as well as you do. So I feel all three are critical to the ecosystem, and an investor must try and accumulate knowledge from wherever they can, an RIA, RA, or influencer.
Right. So thorough homework, there's no cutting corners when it comes to that, at least if you're getting into the markets. And that's perhaps what the market regulator as well is trying to say, till they come out with those guidelines that can be a framework for RIAs as well as influencers. We're all going to have to do that homework, at least if we're going to be looking at the markets. But let me thank all my guests for giving us their perspective. Milan Sharma, the founder and MD at 35 North Ventures. Abhishek Kar, thank you so much for coming in here. Nirav, Karkera as well, giving us all of your perspective. I hope this was interesting for those who are wondering who is the real advisor. Well, for now, let's take it upon ourselves and do that bit of homework, because that's how then we're going to be informed when we get out. Thanks so much from everybody putting this together. Thanks for tuning in.